So I wanted to talk to you today about your business endeavors, your career, your life endeavors, even if your family disagrees with you, and how to pursue that, how to continue. If your mom disagrees, if your family, your dad, your siblings disagree or don't like the path that you've chosen, in my experience, it can be challenging to continue to push forward, even though you're doing what it is that you want to do, what you feel is right, what kind of feeds your soul. And so in this video, I want to share a little bit about what I experienced and how I continued to make decisions along the way to keep myself happy and to keep my sanity and not just to live a life that other people wanted of me or for me, because that happens so much in society and in America and in people's lives. One of the biggest things that I've seen in my clients is the people pleasing persona, the aspect of living a life for somebody else and not living your own life, living out of alignment. And this is extra important because I saw a post on Instagram the other day. So it must be true, right? Well, it was about the blue zones, the centurions, the people who lived the longest. And what they all had in common was that they lived an authentic life true to themselves because they didn't have the chronic stress of unalignment, of misalignment. They didn't have the stress and the pain of having a life somebody else wanted them to live that they were actually living versus the life they wanted to live for themselves. So, hey, my name is Andre, and I started my path several years ago. I used to be a software developer. Now I'm an energy healer and coach. And it's been a very interesting journey to go from A to B. And I want to share a little bit about that story with you here today. So, let's go back to when I decided my major in college, right? In my mind, I wanted to be a drummer. And my mom and my dad was a software QA manager. My mom was a teacher. And I'll never forget this. She said, "Yeah, we'll support you in what you want to do, but," and there's that but in there, right? "But we want you to make sure you can get a job." And so I ended up going with computer science because I was good at math and all the things. And so even from early ages, we are conditioned and programmed. And I remember ever since that day, I felt sad when I made that decision. And so for the past over a decade, and then add on top of that, 4 years of college, I've been doing something that I didn't really want to do in the first place. Right. And so getting out of that takes time. I mean, think about doctors who go down their path or neurosurgeons, or you go into some business and you build it for so long, but you didn't actually want to do it. And there are some outliers like Andre Agassi, right? Pro tennis player. He hates tennis because his dad always made him play and was like, made him the best, but he hates it. So it's up to you what kind of life you want to live, of course, right? But I remember ever since I made that decision, like I was sad about making that decision. I've always wanted to get back to playing drums ever since. But, I did the whole software developer thing. I went to UC Berkeley, one of the best schools, and I got a job. I was making six figures straight out of college, working in Silicon Valley. And so this is where it gets interesting. And so if you've ever decided to pivot, this is when I decided to make my first pivot into a more aligned life. And it could look different for everybody, right? If you want to journal along as we talk about what these pivots were and what they could look like for you in your life, feel free to do so. So after 3 years of living in Silicon Valley, I was living in Oakland, California, and working this tech job, making good money. After 3 years, I was like, this is not the life I want to live. And I actually knew, I mean, the day I graduated, like, this is not what I'm going to do forever. I knew that. I knew that internally. So that's the first sign, right? If you've known early on into your career or your choices or whatever that it's not what you want to do for a long time, that's your first sign that you're out of alignment. And I don't want to say it's your first sign to get out, but it's the first sign of like, okay, there's a clue that this isn't making me happy. And I even remember when I was in high school, I told myself, I don't want a desk job. My dad had a desk job, my mom, teacher, my dad worked from home, which was cool, but I was like, I don't want a desk job. And what did I do? I went and got a desk job because, you're 18, you don't know what you're doing. And at least I didn't have the conviction and confidence at the time to make decisions opposite of what my family wanted. There are people that do. Think about the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, the people that drop out of college, out of school, and still make it because they know they're that aligned with themselves and they're able to make those decisions sooner in life and stick to who they are. Super important, super, super important. And it's just taken me a long time, longer than all those people to get there, right? But you can think about the Ray Krocs of the world, and you can be 60 and still make the change. It's just a matter of when have you had enough, right? And when you want to actually switch. So I went into software 3 years after graduating. I was like, I've had enough of this. And I was heartbroken. There were girls involved, and it's like I need a change, a big change. And so I was like, I'm not happy with my job. And so that's when I started looking at what I could do instead and going to a different company. But then I saw an article or an ad or a post or something about this group and this community called Wi-Fi Tribe. Now, it was actually, sorry, it was for Remote Year. And if you've heard of Remote Year or Wi-Fi Tribe, it's basically people who live their digital nomad life and they work remotely and they travel the world working remotely. And Remote Year goes, at least at the time, would go for a year. So I ended up going with Wi-Fi Tribe to go month to month. But I loved the community of Wi-Fi Tribe. Such good people. They're still going today. A lot of those businesses actually shut down during COVID, but they survived. And the decision to leave Silicon Valley and go to travel the world was uncomfortable for me. And it seemed impossible. But I had done impossible things before. So if you've done something that you thought was impossible, that is a key cornerstone in your life where you now have evidence that you can do something that you previously believed to be impossible. For me, it was doing the human flag. The human flag is where you're holding a street sign. You see people do that, or they'll do it on like a fence or something like that. And you're holding your body completely sideways. I'll find a photo and I'll put it in this video. I used to think that was physically impossible to do. And guess what? It's not. And I've done it a million times now. And when I got that, I was like, wow, I can basically do anything. As long as it's within the realm of physics, let's go with that as our baseline. You can basically do anything you want. And so when I saw this ad or this content for Wi-Fi Tribe, I was like, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. Let me figure out how I'm going to do this. And needless to say, my mom disagreed. Okay, so let's actually back up a little bit. So I didn't know this until I was already in college and already graduated. But my best friend told me, because our moms were friends, and my best friend told me years later that my mom didn't actually want me to go to UC Berkeley. She helped me write my essay and everything to get in, but from what he said, like kind of secretly, she would have rathered that I stayed close to Southern California, which is where we lived. And so she didn't want me to go. But my friend's mom was like, you kind of have to let him go and like be the best he can be, spread his wings, do his thing, right? So at least in Latin culture, moms always want their kids to be close. And so imagine if she hadn't let me gone to the best school for what I was going to do, right? Alone, right there. That's like holding you back. But she did. And I got a great career out of it and worked for Amazon and Apple. And I interned there, didn't want to go back and work there, but worked for Pandora Radio right out of college. And that was the next point where she disagreed with me again. So I had interned at Apple and I had an offer to go back as full time out of college, right? As a graduate, as opposed to an intern. And there was a part of me that just didn't want to go back to work at Apple. And I loved music because remember, I wanted to be a drummer. So I love music and I was getting into tech and I was like, let me find the way to merge these worlds together of music and technology. And the answer was to work for Pandora Radio. So I did. And I remember discussing it with my mom, and she was like, "It's all about the resume, Andre. You want to get the best companies on your resume. Maybe go to Apple for a couple years. They had a program where I could rotate and see what I liked, and maybe do something else later." But there was that part of me inside that was like, I want to do what I want to do. And so one of the interesting things you learn along the way is how to tell which voice is yours and which voice is not yours. And sometimes the voice that's yours is the quieter one. And the voice that's what everyone else wants is the louder one, or at least the more noisy one. And so over time, you start to strengthen your own voice and your own intuition. And to do that, a lot of times, at least for me, I had to remove all the other influences and voices to get all of that just energy out of my system so that it wasn't constant noise, right? So going to UC Berkeley, right? Disagreement number one. Going to Pandora instead of Apple, disagreement number two. 3 years into my six-figure plus corporate tech job right out of college, I decide I'm going to go work remotely to a different company who will let me travel, because Pandora would not have let me be the digital nomad. So what ends up happening is I get accepted into Wi-Fi Tribe. I change companies. I leave Pandora for a company called iFit. They own Nordic Track. They own a lot of the fitness equipment, but no one had heard of iFit before, really. But people knew about Nordic Track, right? But same company, just a subsidiary. So my mom's like, "You're going to go work for some like no-name company out of Silicon Valley." The company is in the middle of Logan, Utah. Gorgeous sunsets, some of the most beautiful mountain sunsets I've ever seen. We would have on sites. They'd fly us into Salt Lake and we would drive about an hour north through the mountains and catch the sun. Oh my God, it was gorgeous. But she disagreed with that one too. And here's the funny thing. Well, I don't want to say it's funny, but she benefited from the decisions that I made, even though they were against what she wanted. And let me give you an example. And I say she, but just family in general, right? Um, 3 months, September, so May, June, July, October. I can't count my months right now. Jesus. August, September. So May, June, July, August. So about 4 months after I start traveling, um, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And it actually happened while I was visiting my family for a week. I was in between. So I got on a plane. My first country I went to was Bolivia. Never in my life thought I would go to Bolivia. Loved it. Beautiful, amazing people, beautiful landscapes, some of the best things you've ever seen in your life. Super unique. I went to Bolivia and then it was about 6 weeks. And then I spent a month in Ecuador and then I spent a month in Costa Rica. And then I was going to go to Mexico for a month. And in between, I went to Southern California to visit my family before hopping down to Mexico because there was always a week in between the countries. And while I was there visiting my family, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. He had a seizure in the ER after getting an MRI. And they said, "Well, you've got a tumor in your brain." And so I decided to stay and help look after my dad and help my mom because my mom was obviously going to be taking care of him. Had I not had the remote job, I would not have been able to do that, right? If I didn't have the ability to work remote, I would not have been able to have the time to spend living back with my parents for 4 months. I probably would have had to be there for like a little bit, go back up to Silicon Valley, be in person. This was before COVID. This was before working remote was the thing, right? So even though she didn't like the idea of me living Silicon Valley because of the career side of things, the family relationship lifestyle side of things paid off in a big, big way because my other sisters were not as able to my two sisters, not as able to be there as often or as much to help take care of my dad as he needed. And my mom was still working, so as a teacher. So there was just a lot, and there was a lot of just chaos and drama and all these things that happened in that period of time. Um, but I just find it interesting that even though my decisions went against their beliefs or their philosophy, they still were able to benefit from the decisions that I made. And so after traveling for a bit, I ended up moving to Puerto Rico, and then I ended up moving to Tampa. And I ended up getting into, before I moved to Tampa in Puerto Rico, I ended up learning about the stock market and investing. And I did some trading because there's a lot of traders in Puerto Rico and you kind of get into it. But just learning about more so about, investing and all these things, because there's tax laws and advantages to living in Puerto Rico. And so I was able to invest more of my income. And I got into business and started learning about um, all of that. And so as I started to invest, my mom realized, okay, well, Andre can help manage the finances of the family because he knows more about this investing stuff. And so again, another benefit that came from me leading the life that I wanted to, and getting into the things that interest me and that were aligned with me, if that makes sense. And so I just say, that kind of that story because now again coming into this next phase of my business, of my career. And I don't want to call it a career because it's really a career shift. It's a business transition I'm getting into, right? From Silicon Valley software engineer to energy healer and coach is a pretty big transition. In my mind, they're actually very similar. I'm going from debugging software and improving it to debugging humans and improving them, helping people become the best versions of themselves, and healing, but also optimizing. You do the same thing with software. You rip out what's bad, what's slowing it down and everything, and you add in new stuff that's good. You refactor the code. It's the same thing, just a different medium, right? And so what I'm getting into now is also, even though she might not see it yet, is also going to help my family because I'll be able to work on my family in ways and help them heal that they were not aware that were possible or that they wouldn't try otherwise. For example, my oldest sister is autistic, and I'm very curious how, and just for the record, like I'm learning from the best guy in the world that does this energy work. It's not Reiki, it's way more practical than that. It really is quite fascinating what people are saying, what my clients are saying, um, what I'm hearing, as people text me days after a session, they're like, whoa, like this pain is gone, or I don't need any coffee today, just really, really fascinating things that are surprising to me still, to be honest. But again, you think something's impossible and then you do it and it's like, okay, I can do this. So I don't want to rant too much, but I just think it's interesting how when you start to live your life the way you want to live it, and you start to get your family out of you, you start to unprogram and uncondition all of the things that your family wanted or expected you to be. You get that out of you, you live your life. There's going to be friction. And even though your family members might not agree with your decision, and maybe they don't even talk to you about it. Like when I talk to my mom about the plans that I have to move and to move to Dallas and to start my energy business. She's literally, she says like, well, at least you have a 4-year degree that, so you won't starve. At least you have an education so you won't starve. And, my mom's a teacher. She wants to make sure everyone's educated, and she obviously, it's coming from the best intentions, 100%. But that not chronic, but that constant mindset of pulling you closer to what they want as opposed to supporting and lifting you into help your endeavors grow. That's the gravity piece that a lot of us face. And if you hear the stories from not all, but some of these successful people, like the Sarah Blakeleys of the world, that are just at that level, a lot of them, or at least some of them, had that support very early on of my mom always supporting me. My mom always said I could do anything I wanted, right? My family always did this. My family rooted for me, yada, yada, yada. Not everyone has that. And so you have to find ways to stay true to yourself, even though it could be hard or uncomfortable, because you might feel like you're separating a little bit from your family, or at least the family's belief systems, right? And that happens. And that's when you realize everyone's different and everyone's on their own path. And not everyone is going to see your vision the way you see your vision. It's like Will Smith said, like, once I decide something, like, it's done. It's already done. Now we just have to wait for you all to see. And you don't necessarily have to tell them. You show them, you tell them by showing them after it's happened, after it's done, right? Because sometimes it's not even worth sharing your plans, because you know they're not going to be into it or be interested or anything. Like when I told one of my sisters, like, yeah, I'm working on this energy healing course. Why don't you, when I come visit for Christmas, like, let's do a session. And she just laughed and she said, I don't think I could. And she's a surgeon and pretty anti, or doesn't believe in the stuff that I'm getting into, the energy healing, even though there's research behind it and it's, been practiced by hundreds of people all over the world, and probably more than that. And the things that I'm hearing from my clients are pretty mind blowing. So the message that I want to impart upon you in this video is to just keep going. You have to find, and it's a discovery process, discover what it is that you want to do. And it might take a while, but that's okay. As long as you're on the path of discovery, right? You want to get to being on the journey of self-discovery. That's the goal. Your goal isn't to do the thing you love forever and die happy. The goal is to be on the journey of self-improvement and self-discovery, because that journey never ends. You can always get better. So the journey is the destination. Sorry. And so that's the goal. You want to get there. And as you get there, you'll find that some people are going to come with you and support you. Other people are going to want you to be who they want you to be. Bob Dylan has a quote in one of his songs that says, everyone wants you to be just like them. And it's true. A lot of people will just talk at you about their philosophy and their beliefs and want you to be just like them. Most people do. Everyone thinks that they're right, everyone else is wrong, and you should be on my side, not the other side, because they're bad, but we're good. But you can just be you and not worry about what side anyone's on of anything. Just focus on what you want to do. Be a little bit more self-focused, self-resonant, right? You want to work on what I call self-resonance. Are you in resonance with who you are and yourself? Or are you out of resonance, out of coherence, and living a life for somebody else, even if it might be subconsciously? This happens all the time. I see it all the time. So you want to keep going, and you want to have that strength, and you want to have a reason and a source of knowingness, that what you're doing is the right thing for you. And for some people, that is what they believe to be God's path for themselves. You might call it your calling. You might call it just, I've always known I was going to do this, or I've always had this as part of me. It's always been innate. Whatever label, whatever you want to call that thing, that reason for being, that reason why you're here, right? The ikigai. What is your reason for being? When you find that, you want to have that be strong enough so that even if the people that you love the most don't agree with your decisions, you can still push forward anyway and tell them it was all worth it by showing them your success and how they will benefit from the path that you've chosen. I hope this video resonated, guys. I'll cut it here, and I'll see you in the next one.